I'll do the intro. Welcome to Inside the Mind's Eye, where we explore the introspective nature of reality, isness, thusness, and all the things that are good. And I've got a special guest today. I've got Brandon Lasker. And what I'd like to do real quick before we start is I'll just go over, I took some notes. Career CEO, man. That's what you do currently. You go to mental health facilities or treatment centers and you help make them profitable. Is that pretty much sums it up?
Yeah, profitability among other things, but yeah, that's accurate.
And the way we know each other is we met through the 12-step fellowship, and you became my sponsor, and we've gone through the steps a few times together.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I guess what I'd like to do with this conversation is talk about your early sobriety. What is it that brought you into sobriety? Why did you get sober? And then go through your story or your life as it relates to the types of spiritual experiences or
Mhm.
and I want to say this before we go into, I want to kind of define the word spirituality for someone who may be listening. It's the unseen. So things like thoughts or feelings, beliefs, experiences, these things that can't be known outside of your own experience. They can't actually be measured or recorded. Now, I can write thoughts, I can express my feelings, but they're only known by the individual. They're of the spirit in the sense that it is, there's no real material in the objective world to work with when it comes to these types of things that we'll be discussing. And yeah, take it away. Let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate it. So, the first question was, why did I come to sobriety? Is that right?
What happened?
Yeah. Well, I think I need to go back a little bit before that
Sure.
first. So, I think as you and I both know, when you hear people's story about in recovery that find their way to drugs at a certain point in their life, they're typically seeking something. I've had it explained to me by someone once that there's a level of awareness that something more exists than what we experience. I think the challenge becomes, at least for me anyway, is just like, where do you find that? Where do I find that? And you throw that on top of the fact that um, my natural state, if you will, was not a very comfortable state for me. Um, and so, anyways, and there was times, which I'll get to later, when we kind of start talking about the spiritual piece, where I would experience a sense of satisfaction in life, from moments of young childhood to teenage years to prior to putting any drugs in my body or anything like that. But I guess you can say I didn't quite understand, nor did I have someone kind of explaining or keeping me focused on um, what was happening there. So, anyways, ultimately, I just growing up, I was exposed to, various substances, by friends, other people in my life. And, I liked the way it made me feel. And uh, you know, thought I was in control of it. And then within a short amount of time, realized I wasn't. And you know, uh, tried to quit multiple times on my own. Kind of the really summation, I guess you could say, or summation of the whole story is, I was in and out of treatment centers myself from about 19 to 25, and I got sober when I was 25, and right before I kind of, I guess you can say, got sober, um, I was in a real dark place. I didn't think that I had the ability to get sober because I had tried multiple times with multiple failed attempts. And I remember telling myself, okay, this is the last try that I'm going to do. If I don't get sober this time, I'm just going to stop trying and stop giving up. Now, there was also, too, probably grace operating in my life long before I realized it. I also then followed that thought was followed with another thought of, okay, well, when I go to this place, I'm just going to do exactly what they tell me to do. Because if it doesn't work, then I'll be able to be like, see, like I told you, this thing doesn't work, you know? And sure enough, it worked. And yeah, I mean, I ended up in rehab as kind of we shared. I uh, met someone that's now my guide, my sponsor, whatever you want to call it, and 12 steps, and has been for quite some time. And he took me through the 12 steps, and I had a really powerful experience. And, and then as, it's being someone that was in such a hopeless place, I found hope, and then I wanted to share it with everyone. And no one could stop me from doing that. I was on a mission and I loved it. I wanted to just tell everyone that, hey, you can get better and there's a way to get better. And that has been a really key part of my life for the last 15 years. And kind of, as you mentioned as well, ended up kind of working in this space as well, which I do consider separate from my own personal recovery. But I guess the point is recovery has really given me everything in my life today, beyond my sobriety. My wife is in sobriety. My kids have a sober dad. They've never seen me not sober. As was mentioned, I work in recovery. So, I've heard it said before, so I'm kind of stealing this line. It's like the thing that took everything away now has given me everything. And
Wait, what do you mean? The thing that took everything away?
yeah, well, my addiction, right? My addiction at
Oh,
one point in my life took everything I thought worth of value, and even internally, right? Self-esteem, self-worth, all that. It took it away, but recovery has given me everything.
okay, I see.
Yeah. So that's a real uh, brief summary of the last 40 years in regards to recovery.
Okay. So both you and I, we were how do I describe it? So our type of drug, the way that we used drugs and alcohol was very similar as well. So I'd like to, one of the things that I had to come to terms with in my own sobriety was, I was using a lot of substances because they felt good. It really wasn't for me. There wasn't anything else other than this makes me feel good. I just want to feel good like this all the time. And so the idea that when I got sober, like how is sobriety go? How am I going to experience a level of contentment and a level of joy that I felt through the use of these substances? Because I feel like I'd reached the pinnacle of the top to the point to where when I got sober and I started getting money, like when I was fully like working through the steps, I wasn't worried about drinking or using anymore. And I started like having, it didn't make me excited at all. I didn't have an interest in worldly or material things because I had felt these extreme highs through the use of my substances. And a lot of my journey in sobriety has been about like waking up and realizing that a lively or engaging experience can be had stone cold sober. And I think we've connected in that area when it comes to these kind of deeper level insight, philosophical, spiritual explorations. And we share a mutual mentor. I was hoping if you could talk a little bit about that. Like, how challenging was it for you to go from always experiencing the highs that you were used to experiencing to being sober? And like, how did you replace that? What was
Hmm.
there a replacement there?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, that's a great question. I think there was a replacement, but not in the way I anticipated, if that makes sense. I think when I was in the treatment center in early sobriety, I mean, and we're talking when I say early sobriety at this point, like let's call it a couple months of sobriety. So not brain. I don't remember the first few months. So of sobriety, but I remember being at this point in kind of like a halfway house type thing. So I had probably been sober for 6 months. And at this point, it had been shared with me kind of the importance of spiritual practices, right? And that in many ways, like they were something to be leaned on to I mean, the way I viewed it internally was to help kind of change my internal state because I was really uncomfortable a lot in sobriety. And I remember being in sober living, going to my bedroom to, I guess you could call it meditate multiple times a day. And it wasn't because I was trying to become like spiritual or whatever the case may be. I just noticed when I went in my room and I sat down and I focused on my breathing for 5, 10 minutes or whatever, I felt a little bit better afterwards. And that was like I actually was not interested when someone first talked to me about meditation and practicing meditation. I didn't really have much of an interest in it. But I guess you can say I kind of found it a bit out of necessity because my level of anxiety was very high for a very long time. And even though I appear outwardly calm, I would say that I experience, you know, anxiety at least as much as the next person, maybe a little bit more, who knows. And so early on, I kind of viewed spirituality or these spiritual practices as a way to um, cope, if that makes sense, and just kind of feel better. And then there was also times in early recovery where it was beyond coping, and there was actually moments where I did feel real joy and all that. But for me, when I look back on those experiences of feeling real joy and satisfaction, for me, it actually came primarily when I was being of service to other people versus um, engaging in a solo spiritual practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. You mentioned you get well, you realize that this process worked. It worked for you. And then you're like I gotta let people know. I gotta let people know that
Yeah.
I've had this change and this experience. And then
Hmm.
and then talk a little bit about what that was like early recovery for you.
Yeah. 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 Well, yeah, when I got sober, I think it was like my fifth or sixth treatment center. Now, the major difference, though, at least in my mind, anyways, was I had actually went through all 12 steps of the 12-step program and began helping other people. And the 12 steps, to those listening that might not be, understand, it's a very large focus actually on a higher power. So God, spirituality, it's 12 steps is very open ended, but it's a very, very strong focus on that. So I actually almost became a little evangelical early on, being in treatment, of like, yes, I'm sober, there's an answer, but it has nothing to do with this treatment center. It has nothing to do with these therapists. And if you want to get sober, you need to work the 12 steps. uh, and it didn't actually go over very well with the people running the facility, because they didn't like me telling the other residents in the treatment center that they're pretty much like wasting their time being in treatment, and they need to find their higher power through the 12 steps, or else they're going to die. And so, but anyways, it was my experience, and I again, for the first time in my life at this point, had a tremendous sense of purpose, which that felt incredibly good. And I deeply desired. I think humans in general desire purpose. I mean, here we are, if you really look at it, floating on a rock in outer space. And, probably the greatest question is like, well, why? Like, why are we here? And I think ultimately within us there's a desire for us to find purpose and find meaning and all that. And being a drug addict, I didn't have that. And then getting sober and being told, hey, you can help someone else, I was like, well, now I have a purpose. So anyways, yeah, I just, but also too, just given my personality, I don't really do anything moderately. That's a lot of us, obviously, and so I became, obsessed, I guess you can say, with the 12 steps. I was listening to, like, going to tons of meetings every day. I was sponsoring tons of people. And then also too, part of the 12 steps is exploring spirituality, exploring religion even. I mean, it says just kind of explore this idea of a higher power, whatever that looks like for you. And I think experientially, I made the tie that how I feel internally in this higher power, like there's some sort of connection there. And so, but I think I was a little misguided early on, and honestly, for probably years of my sobriety, in that I started, and this sounds really bad, I just don't know how others say it, but I started to seek spirituality as if almost it was a substance to change the way I feel, if that makes sense.
Oh,
Um,
100%. I mean,
yeah,
I did it through art. So like, yeah, whatever form it takes. Like I was just trying to, yeah, we find something. That's what I asked about the replacement, is like, did something get replaced? And all of a sudden you're
yeah.
jazzed about.
Well, and like it's like you take, and I have a tendency to do this, like the 12 steps in essence, like early on is a very simple process. I mean, it was literally done in a matter of days, and I went through it and I had an experience, but then like there's this idea, ooh, like now if I really dig into it and I change this part and I add this part, and it's like I was trying to tweak it to get a greater result, like to make it stronger, and then it's like the 11th step is largely about, one's spiritual disciplines or practices. And it's so then I started exploring that, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, this meditation makes me feel good, but there's who I heard about this really spiritual dude in India, and he does this like heavy breathing in his. And like, what if I start doing this heavy breathing? Then like I'll probably be really spiritual, aka like feel really good a lot of the time. So like, and I just started again, like kind of like tinkering it and going down the rabbit hole. But what was happening probably without me realizing it at the time, was like I was trying to control spirituality and control God in a way that I would get a certain effect from it, because I was under the idea that if I'm really spiritual, I'll feel good all the time. And being a good addict, I wanted to feel good all the time. And then, inevitably, over the course of the 15 years of being sober, that belief system has kind of changed uh, a little bit, for me, as far as like what spirituality is, also too what life is, and that there's an understanding of like my current belief, I guess you can say, is like, I currently believe that maybe we're not supposed to feel good all the time,
Maybe not.
and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Maybe it's not
And
about our feelings at all. Maybe our feelings are not actually the point.
yeah, right, exactly. And it's weird. Like for the longest time, that's what I would always say I wanted, is like, hey, I want to feel good. I want to feel good. And of course, yeah, I love to feel good, you know. But what I have found possible as more recently is that I can experience a deep sense of satisfaction with life. And that is, I think, a more accurate uh, uh, definition of, I think, what is possible. Is, because I feel like I've experienced senses of satisfaction in life and gratitude in life, even when I'm sad, even when I'm upset. I mean, I had an experience literally not yesterday, but the day before, where I was upset. Like I was angry, but I was also grateful. Like I came out of the experience and I had gratitude about the experience of being anger, because I saw God in it, if that makes sense.
So there's something really interesting about the 12-step process. Once it's onboarded, the way you described, over a period of a few days for you, and then continued on through helping other guys get well. There's something that happens because you're actually spending a good portion of your time witnessing whatever's occurring internally. So you become, and that's why I really connected with when you said, I started to realize there might be some correlation to the what I'm experiencing internally and with this higher power that I've created objectively. There might be
Mhm.
some relationship there with,
Mhm.
and yeah, I guess I'm curious, for you, when you were in the beginning of your path and you were sharing the message. Did something happen where it grounded you and you realized you slowed down a little bit?
Yeah, 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 for sure. So, and I laughed because it was like, yeah, a lot happened, and it kind of was a wake up call for me, and again, like, um, I got sober and I started helping a lot of people. And I think without realizing it, I believe that a lot of my behaviors and a lot of my struggles in life were directly tied to the fact that I was using drugs. And yeah, there's of course some truth there. Like, I don't, ever since getting sober, I don't worry about really like getting arrested, or, I don't worry about being, what they call dope sick or in withdrawal, or whatever, right? So there's definitely some issues that are directly tied to using drugs. But what I saw was I became really involved in 12-step recovery and started helping a lot of people in kind of a this like it's almost weird. Like I almost like started to become known in the 12-step fellowship as like a really active person in that community. And people started to, in some ways, kind of look up to me or respect me or be like, wow, Brandon does a lot in this community. And, I was again, you couple this with the fact that I'm spending all this time doing like spiritual practices and disciplines. And, I was convinced that, I was, like had evolved into this like, enlightened spiritual type person, you know?
Yeah.
And and then and like I held it together early on pretty well, and then I started kind of chasing the life stuff, because when I got sober I was living at my grandparents' house, and still had a criminal charge, had no college degree, was making like $7 an hour working at the gym. And I was like, all right, then, so I started building my career all of a sudden. And then I ended up like getting married, and just, like kind of the American dream stuff, as they say. Um, and then I remember like, into my engagement in marriage, I remember like losing my temper, and, and, and being shocked, like, oh my God, I can't believe I just acted like that. Like I'm sober. Like I shouldn't act like that. I'm like, I help all these people. Like I can't believe I just said that to my wife, like I would be so ashamed if they found out that I just said that. Like, I'm supposed to be this really like helpful person, and spiritual. I'm giving spiritual advice to everyone, yet here I am acting like a maniac in my own house. And like that's not supposed to be. And it was honestly a big grace. Is like I did a lot of stupid stuff in sobriety, and um, and it became known to those around me, and it embarrassed me. It embarrassed me because I felt like it was ruining my image, this image I'd worked hard to build up. And but really looking back on it, it was the biggest blessing, because it kept me in my humanness, you know and that was the beginning of the grounding process, which continues, has continued for the you know 15 years or so I've been sober. I've come to learn that, and it talks about it in the 12-step recovery textbook, that like using drugs is but a symptom. Like my real issue is that I'm selfish and self-centered. I struggle with resentment. I'm full of fear. I'm dishonest, right? And it was a big wake up call, realizing that, hey, I'm still all those things, not even though I'm not putting drugs in my body. And that was a tough pill to swallow. And the other thing too is like I couldn't meditate that out. I couldn't manifest that out. I couldn't script it. I did this thing called scripting, which is like early on, which was like pretty much affirmative state. Like I couldn't like use affirmations of that out. I am kind. I am kind. I am kind. Like, leave me alone. I'm practicing my affirmations. Like, why are you bothering me right now? You know. You know. And
Yelling,
so
yelling
it's
at
just,
yelling at people. I'm trying to meditate.
yeah, yeah.
It's like
Like
that's your
I mean,
first
that was the thing.
problem
But
number one. You're trying to meditate. That's the you're.
yeah,
I
yeah,
had the same thing, man. I went through, I also realized that the 12-step process had such a profound impact on me that I was like, I need more of it and I'm going to do it the most. And so I
yeah.
would do these inventories like every day for years probably, where I would literally I would write down what I was thinking to think the reality that I was interested in experiencing into existence. So I was just transcribing and talking to myself constantly about what it was that I was interested in experiencing. And I looked at, and I called it a 10th step or an 11th
Hmm.
step.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and and the problem, I mean, maybe it's not a problem, but there's so many different books, there's so many different beliefs, there's so many different religions, there's so much stuff, right? And I think, like, again, as someone that was like, is like, okay, like, where do I begin? Like, how do I do this, like, spirituality thing? It becomes such a journey, because it's like, for instance, like, take that practice of like scripting or manifesting or whatever. I mean, there's tons of people that probably still do that. I remember watching like The Secret. I don't know if you heard, like vision board, like, all right, I'm going to create all these things. And like, the truth is, like, it kind of worked. I remember I had this binder where I would do all my scripting, and I went to this scripting class. It was this really like new agey woo woo lady. Like, this is how you got to feel it as you write it. And we're in, like, just, and I was doing all that. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna get married, and I'm gonna start making money, and I'm gonna get in my own place, and I'm gonna do this and that and that. And it's like, I got all that. It was weird. Like, I actually found that binder, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, all of this stuff really came to be. The but also the realization was, it didn't do for me internally what I thought it would do for me. It's like I got it, and I personally like walked away from that practice, because I was like, for me, I felt like I'm starting to worship these things and spend all my time and energy in stuff, like trying to get all this stuff, in my life. And then I would get it, and it didn't do for me what I was hoping it would do for me. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to script more. Like, no, did I say this much money? Now I mean this much money. Like, did I say this big of a house? I mean this big of a house now. And again, like, there's this idea that, like, if we want to find out what we worship, just look at our behavior and look at our thought life, and that will tell you what you worship. And in that practice, I was, that's what it tells you to do. Think about it, visualize it, feel it. um and I was doing all that, and I was getting all that stuff, but I was still, feeling empty. And again, like, that's, it's weird. It's like, recovery very much is about not using drugs and being sober and helping other people. But it also, like, the blessing of recovery is that that whole problem kind of gets removed. Doesn't mean I can use drugs again. Like, I'm being the deep end. I'm very clear on that. But I don't wake up every day being like, all right, today is about not using drugs. Like, I'm going to make sure I don't use drugs today. It becomes about building a relationship with God or your higher power or whatever you want to call it. And again, it's like, it's, and what is such a great thing about 12 steps is it's so open-ended, because I had so much prejudice against different ideas of God and all that I don't know that I would have been able to hear much else if it wasn't so open-ended. But also, the challenge with it being so open-ended is, then it's just up to me to figure out, like, like, oh yeah, no, like, this sounds like a good road. I'm gonna walk down this road. Like, oh no, then now this sounds like a good road. I'm gonna go down this road. Now, actually, let me do all these roads together. And again, it happened the way it should. But it's like, I I didn't have a good track record of making decisions, and that now I'm trying to make decisions about God and who God is and what God is, and all that. And so, yeah, it's just, it's uh that was one of the challenges, I would say, for me, is like, I just didn't even know where to begin with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it really is. It's there's no way, there's no what is the there's a in the textbook there's no substitute to there's no substitute for your personal experience. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's everybody's responsibility to figure out like this body, this mind, this person, this atom is a unique hardwired composite of a bunch of neuroses and conditioned experiences and traumas or whatever you may want to look like. One of the things my one of my therapists used to say, who I hated, by the way, this guy I did not like. He said he used to tell me, "You got to be pretty angry to put a needle in your arm." And now I was never angry. Like he was trying to convince me that I was an angry person. I never
Yeah.
really experienced any anger, and it was only later on in sobriety that I started to experience what anger felt like. But it didn't exist in my life. But I started to, you know, everything that somebody tells you, or everything that you read, or everything that you hear, it's nobody's responsibility other than my own to figure out what works or doesn't work for me. That's the whole. That's the
Yeah.
whole process of recovery in life. Is we got to know for ourselves. That's the yoga of spirituality. It's like a the science is you. The science is your relationship to whatever it is you're practicing and seeing. Um, but
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, go back to your story a little bit. So you're doing you're coming back down to earth. This character that got created as you were getting well, which I connected with you. Like for me, whether I'm aware of it or not, I reform this caricature of who I think I am. It's always kind of happening, and for me, the practice a lot of times is learning how, or feeling some pain and tension once a character has been crystallized in the way in which I move through the world. All of a sudden, I'm not unknowing living and expressing itself as whatever's happening. All of a sudden, I've got plans, I've got ideas, I know what I need. It just happens like without my consent. So you're going through your recovery, and you feel like you're the guy, and then all of a sudden you realize there's things at work that are out of your control that are arising internally. You can't actually things that you thought were absolved through like the anger stuff. And then this image that was created, that was affirmed by a community, became came into question. Can you talk about what it was like moving through that?
Yeah. Well, like I kind of shared before, it was embarrassing. I think that was, and probably a better word actually would be humbling. Because prior to that experience, I remember, I have a tendency to be very disciplined with stuff that I get focused on. And as part of the 12 steps, there's a process that it recommends in the morning and at evening. In the morning, it's like prayers and meditation. In the evening, it's like a review of the day, where some people write it out, some people do it in their head, or whatever the case may be. And I didn't miss one day for like probably a year or so, right? And I remember like I would be in these meetings, and I'd been sober about a year, and there were guys that have been like sober like 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. And I'd be listening to them share, and they're like, yeah, sometimes I don't get around to my morning stuff. And I was like, in my head, I'd be like, you're so weak. Like you're not even serious about your recovery. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, like what a middle of the road joker here, you know? And like, here I would be this guy with like a year of sobriety being like, yeah, well, I do it every day, like sharing at them in meetings and stuff. And then I went through that experience. And the blessing of all that is that voice started to die down a little bit. And I started to hear people like share their humanness. And I would notice my my judgment would pop up, and then followed by a thought of like, well, well, listen, Brandon, like who are you to be talking? Like, you look what you just did yourself, you know? And that is, I think that was honestly kind of became a spiritual gift from God in some regard, even though it was a very uncomfortable one, is the more I came to terms with um, my own shortcomings, despite my discipline, despite my um, aggressive pursuit to be this enlightened being, and still falling short. It's like, well, if and falling very short. I mean, some of the stuff I did, it was wild, wild, and so it just kind of started to become like, well, Brandon, like, who are you to judge? And that voice became quieter. And ultimately, I became more compassionate, and then the other thing too is I honestly became more helpful to people because as I became more comfortable with my shortcomings, I guess you can say, and understanding like my humanness, I guess you can say, um, like people would relate to that. Like people would be able to be like, oh wow, like like he struggles with this, so do I. And like he can whole understand me, and so it was kind of interesting because I started actually getting a lot of people reaching out to me, and I'd be talking with them and I'd get this a lot. It's like, man, I don't know why I feel really comfortable telling you this, but and then they tell me some secret or some struggle they have or whatever. But I think that was just because I had in some ways come to terms with my own shortcomings more, if that makes sense. So, um, but yeah, that was, I guess, kind of the blessing of that experience. Now, the I don't want to say the struggle or the challenge with it is like, you know, for the vast majority of my sobriety after that, I would have this experience of wanting to do the right thing, wanting to be loving, wanting to be kind, and falling short of that, and falling very short of that. Not just like, oh, hey, I shouldn't have said that, but like just acting out like really severely, that sort of thing. And that became its eventually kind of became its own uh what baffling situation of like, hey, I'm working hard, I've been sober a while, I really want to be this good person, I'm this good person for a little bit, I'm this good person for a little while, but then I'm inevitably hurting people in my life. And um that became something that I struggled with uh, the vast majority of my sobriety, and really started to feel hopeless around until recently, and so again, it was kind of this double-edged sword where it's like, well, yes, like I'm a human, but then there's also this idea of like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to, I don't want to say supposed to struggle to this extent, but maybe I'm not supposed to be creating this much harm in my life as I am. And I was confused as to why I did, if that makes sense.
I mean, that's all. That is the ultimate. That is the ultimate. Like that is why, at the end of the day, this is just for me. At the end of the day, there's no other alternative but turning my will and my life over to this power. There's no other alternative. I cannot decide and choose how I show up on a day-to-day experience. I cannot decide or choose what feelings or thoughts or actions arise out of this being. I have no ability to change myself. And the thing that's attempting to do the changing is the thing that needs to be changed. So it can't be done. I can't do it. For me, that is the third step experience lived on a day-to-day experience. And it took me a long time to really hit that wall, come to terms with it, and allow myself to die. And it's still a process. It's a continual process. I think that's where we met. I think we kind of met at the beginning of that process for me. And I think a little bit about what you just described. I've been lucky to share with you as you've gone through this type of stuff. So I'd like now, maybe we could talk a little bit about what that process has been like for you. And I'd like you to touch on some effacement type stuff and types of, because there was a spell there for about 6 months to a year where you were really destabilized in reality. I'd like to talk about that a little bit too.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think, and if it's okay with you, maybe what I'll do is just kind of get into the, the spirituality as it's related kind of to the course of my life, right? From like early on to current. And it's kind of like I shared about earlier in the interview here. um there was, I would get these little glimpses of God, I guess you can say, like even as a little kid. Like I even remember, so I was raised with pretty religious parents, in a pretty religious household. I was raised in the Catholic Church, but like full on, like I was like, first communion, confirmation. I was an altar server at our local Catholic church, like really involved in that, and didn't really personally have much of a desire to be myself. I just did it because that's what we did in my house. And but I remember sometimes like being, at like a camp, or like singing, like we'd sing like a song and being around other people praying or something, and kind of starting to feel something like a little bit. It was kind of like I would like, again, this idea of like the satisfaction, like I remember feeling like okay kind of in those moments, as someone that like largely didn't feel okay most of my life. And fast forward to getting sober. There's this line in the textbook of the 12, one of the 12-step fellowships, that says, be quick to see where religious people are right, make use of what they offer. And it just, the idea behind that line is like, start exploring your concept of a higher power, whatever that is. And it's kind of like we talked about, there's so much stuff out there. There's so much stuff out there. I mean, it was funny. I remember, like when we were talking just a little bit ago, thinking back on some of the stuff I did, and it's kind of hilarious now, but it was just like, it just goes to show, like I was just seeking, and I just didn't really know what to do. I mean, I went to this like one ashram, I guess it was, with like some friends of mine, and we were doing like this like group meditation, and the guy literally had us all stand up and like put our arms out like this, and so now start swaying like a tree, and like here we are, like standing in this room, like swaying like a tree, because I'm thinking, okay, this will make me more godlike, like this will make me like closer to God. And then I remember one time, like I found this book on Amazon about astral projection. And I was like, and it was thick. It was like a huge booklet. And I'm like practicing this stuff, and like, like I don't know why. I just thought maybe if I could start floating around, outside my body, like that would make me closer to God, or something. And then got into like, what is it, the Course in Miracles, which is like, it's really an expensive book, let's just say, to say the least. And I start practicing that. Um, and again, just kind of always seeking, things, or seeking God. But again, like what the 12 steps does, which is what makes it so open, like people with so much prejudice available, is it says your conception of God. And so it becomes like, it's like, well, I'm trying to figure that out, like trying to figure out my conception of God. So I'm just doing all these things. And, I think I was under the belief, and again, this is just my current belief now, that everything spiritual is of God. That was what I used to believe. And that belief has changed for me personally, but that was what I believed at the time. So everything that I could look into was just a different path to God. And so I'm doing all this stuff. And then, yeah, I meet this gentleman, and we're talking. And I have a, I guess you can call it an intoxicating experience. And it caught me off guard. And I didn't quite understand what was happening. I thought, to be honest with you, I thought if my mind went to, I thought there was like some like poison gas in the air, like coming through the vents or something, because I felt intoxicated almost. And anyways, long story short, this man identified with a mystical religion of sorts. And I also, being an addict, really enjoyed the way that felt, even though it kind of caught me off guard. And I felt this experience for a period of time, and then it wore off. And I called him and I said, "What just happened there? I want to know more about this." And so he told me to start. He's like, "Come, like, let's start meeting." And we started to meet. And of course, the next time I show up, like ready to get intoxicated, like, and it didn't happen, and I'm all disappointed. But again, it started me down. I guess that was like the first of, I guess you could say, a more formalized path. Now that man at that point identified more of like an Islamic Sufi tradition. And I wouldn't say that I became a Sufi, by any means, but I started to practice some of the disciplines, if you will, of that tradition. So things like Salat, which is just like the prayer, with the body and such. Like I would start doing some of that. Zikr, which is kind of just like a meditative chant prayer type of thing. Start doing some of that. And like the thing is like I was experiencing these states. So again, at the time I was under the belief like, okay, this is of God. This is of God. Like this is keep going on this path here. And I learned a lot about different ideas, like the idea of like effacement, which is kind of this idea where it's like, okay, well, I'm not talking, I'm being talked. I'm not moving, I'm being moved. And like I would kind of have experiences around some of this stuff. And again, like in that specific path for me, anyways, I'd go through these states of feeling like really intoxicated, and then which is kind of referred to as like expansion, and then contraction, which is like a just a real discomfort. Like, so you kind of go from like really open to really uh, like we would call it like a burning, like an uncomfortability inside. And so again, like I'm going through all this, and I again like I was kind of on that path for about 8 years or so. And uh, as kind of was mentioned also earlier, I at this point started to experience some success in my career, and I got an opportunity to start running behavioral health facilities as being a facility CEO. And I was, originally from Atlanta, so I started moving, and I moved to New Mexico, lived in Santa Fe, I moved to Pensacola, Florida, I moved to Tucson, Arizona, and then I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, for a period of time. And again, it was just kind of like still a little bit of like a hodgepodge of spiritual practices, um, you know, everything under this belief, everything is of God, all things point to the same God. Um, and yeah, I definitely will never forget this experience. I was in Alabama, in the basement of the house, and sitting there with my now wife, at the time girlfriend. And I was actually we were playing a video game together. Uh, we were playing Diablo, the video game. And all of a sudden, so there's this being, I guess you can call it, in Diablo. I think her name's Lilith. She's like a demonic being or whatever. And she's like in this cut scene in the video game. And it was weird. I remember seeing, like, just playing the video game, and then all of a sudden the thought came of like, oh, this is uh, a demon. And then it was like, well, who created this eternal, like, if there's angels and demons, like, who created these eternal beings? And all these thoughts happened like instantaneous, back to back to back to back to back, in one split second. And it was just like uh, kind of popped off in my mind, right? And anyways, all these thoughts immediately started trailing off one another to be, and what I was confronted with is the reality of eternity. But I experienced it in such a way that it completely baffled me in the moment. And it was like all of a sudden there was I was looking around, and there was this realization of like, it was like almost as if I thought it for the first time, of like, where did all this come from? And it sent me into this panic. And I, I put the controller down. I was like, I need to go outside. And I go outside of the house, and I'm looking around, and I'm in not amazement. It wasn't a pleasant experience. It was almost like panic of like, but it was so weird because it was almost as if I was just thinking this for the first time ever, of like, where did all this come from? And I'm like sitting, and I'm looking at the grass, and I'm looking at the trees, and I'm like, this literally had to come from nothing. And like, how did this happen? How did this happen? And I remember like Sarah came outside and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm looking at her and I'm like, "How is she here? Like, how did even she come to being?" And then I'm just like, and then I'm like, it's just like, it's just that was it was this very intense experience. Now, again, externally, if you looked at me, I was holding it together pretty good, but internally, it was just like this, like I almost felt like I had all of a sudden been transplanted, like transported into this world that I had never been to before. And she ended up going outside, and I just stayed outside, just looking around, like questioning everything, questioning everything. And it was really uncomfortable, and I wish it would have went away, but it didn't. That actually stayed with me for over a year, probably. Not to that extent. It would kind of come in waves. But early on, it was pretty unbearable for like months. And
I remember some of our phone conversations. I might not have helped so much because I'd be like, yeah, that's what it is, bro.
yeah.
This is what it is.
And but I remember I went to the gentleman that helped me or that I had that first experience with. And because I was, and I also, like, I called my brother. My brother's a psychiatrist. And I was like, "Am I going psychotic right now?" He's like, "Well, are you seeing things?" And I said, "No." He's like, "Are you hearing things?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, you're not going psychotic." And I was like, "All right." I thought I was literally having a late stage schizophrenic, like I was going schizophrenic. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, like this is scary." Um, and so I go back to the other guy, and he's like, "Listen," he's like, it's, he's like, "It's a mystical experience. These experiences happen. I suggest you start reading about from like saints and people that claim to know God or whatever." And I'm like, okay. So of course, me
That'll
and like
help.
my spiritual, you know, egoic, nature, like I'm trying to find the most heady, obscure saints that no one's ever heard of, because like only they have the real truth. Like I'm reading these books that I don't understand what they're saying at all, and I'm just like, all right, or whatever. And it was scary. Like, I had a practice of meditating. I couldn't meditate. It would freak me out too bad. Um, I really even struggled with the idea of even thinking about God, because then if I thought about God, I thought about eternity, I thought about infinity, I thought about creation, and my mind couldn't make sense of it all, and it would kind of send me into panic. And so it's almost like I started to just kind of push spirituality away in a sense as a whole, because it was too overwhelming to think about for me. Um, and then after about maybe 3 months of that, or so 4 months of that, I ended up getting transferred uh, for my job, and I ended up moving to like St. Augustine, Florida area, Jacksonville, Florida area, and I moved out to this house. My then fiance and my children and such were still in other states. I'd moved out early. I'm waiting on the furniture to get out there. I started at the new program out there. And there was this idea that came to me that like it was like, well, uh Jesus, there's this guy Jesus, and Jesus claimed to know God. Well, I think more than that, he actually claimed to be God. But I had like a lot of uh, feelings about it. Like even saying that name was very uncomfortable for me. Like very like I was almost embarrassed to even tell people. Like it was very. it was just, but it was weird, like it wouldn't go away. And so, and then I was like, but I was like, it, to me, like the Bible and Christianity and all that was like, that was like for like people that weren't really spiritual, you know, like that was for like just like, you know, Ned Flanders next door who wanted to know God. Like he went to church and, you know, was a Christian. Meanwhile, I'm like, you know, pretty much in God's presence with my deep practices over here, you know. And so, but it was weird. I like, so I had my phone and I downloaded like a Bible app, and I had no interest in reading the Bible. The reason I downloaded the Bible app was because I grew up a Catholic, and I uh, knew about the Gospels and such, and I knew that the Gospels were an account of Jesus and what Jesus said. So I was like, I want to read that. I just want to read that and see what he says. So, anyways, I started reading it in secret. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even tell Sarah because, again, like I felt really weird that I was even doing it. Because out of everything, like if it was the Bhagavad Gita, if it was the Quran, if it was anything, like I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. Like, because I think there was this idea I had, like, look how spiritual, look how I'm exploring all these things. But again, like the Bible's like, come on, like that's for Mr. Rogers, you know, type spirituality, you know. And so but I'm reading it and I just can't stop reading it. And I'm reading it at night or whatever. No, and I gotta tell you this. This gets a little rough. So backtrack before that other experience, there was a guy that was in this like Sufi group with me, and we knew each other. And just to be honest with you, and I mean, he would be the first to tell you this. He was like kind of like Eeyore. Like he was always just in a bad mood, like always upset, you know, like always glasses half empty, like life stinks, you know, kind of thing. And we were in this group together and we would do it. And I hadn't talked to him in probably a year or two, and I'll never forget it. I was at the gym with Sarah, and we were working out, and he calls me, and he's like, "Hey, man," and he sounds so different. He sounds like really like, "Hey," but like enthusiastic, you know, and like, and he's like, "Hey," he's like, "I need to let you know you're coming up in my prayers a lot," and I was like, "Huh?" And he's like, "Oh man, I the Holy Spirit," that's the word he would use. The Holy Spirit told me that it's working on your heart right now. And something's happening with you, Brandon. Something's happening. And I would love to talk to you more about it. And I remember being like, okay, buddy. You know, well, hey, I'm really, sounds like you're doing great. Like, nice talk, you know, like keep me posted, you know, kind of thing. And like I didn't, and I told Sarah, I was like, that was kind of weird, you know. And then I didn't talk to him for like 2 or 3 months. And then he called me again. And like it was a very similar, hey, you're coming up. The Holy Spirit's talking to me about you, you know. And I'm just like, all right, buddy, you know, he's talking to you or whatever. So, anyways, fast forward to Florida, and I keep reading this stuff or whatever, and I'm reading it kind of in secret. And then I won't forget it. The next morning, I get up early. Was in this habit of like going to the gym before work, and I'm at the gym, and there's something in me that just says, listen to like, I guess it's more or less called like worship music, like the song about praising God, Jesus, whatever. And so I put in my headphones. I like type in like worship music or something, and I press play, and it's like it almost makes me cry just instantly. But it's like this song comes on. I think it's called "Holy, Holy, Holy." But literally, this woman just comes on and starts saying, "You are holy." And like I just start bawling instantly. It's just like I'm just overcome with this like feeling of peace and love. And I'm just like I just start bawling in the gym, like instantly hearing the song. I'm like I turn it off and I'm just like, what just happened, or whatever. And I go back home, and then this guy that's been calling me, I haven't talked to for months. He comes to mind, and I'm like, call him. And I I end up calling him or whatever, and I'm like, hey, buddy, you remember?
Sorry, hold on one sec.
No, you're good.
What?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right, but
There's Brendan. You want to say hello? I mean, Brandon, you want to say hello? You can say hello in the mic.
Penny.
Hello. How's it going?
All right, I'm going to finish talking to Brandon. You want to go get breakfast with Mom? Okay, go get breakfast with Mom, and then we'll hang out. Okay, so you're in the gym. You go to
Yeah.
he
So
calls you. He calls you afterwards.
No, I have the thought to call him
Okay.
after that experience. And so I call him. I hadn't talked to him for the last time he called me with this, like, hey, the Holy Spirit's talking to me. It was like, it had been like several months. So I hadn't talked to him in a while. And I called him and I said, hey, man, like, just had a really weird experience. And I just want to tell you about it. I just want to tell you about this. And, he's like, sure. And so I explained pretty much like, hey man, I've been like reading the Bible, don't tell anyone about it. Like, and then I just listened to the song and I just start bawling and I don't get what's going on. And I haven't even told Sarah about this. Because I don't even want to tell her what's happening right now. And he was just like, man, like, he's like, that's awesome. Like he's like, I really would encourage you to tell Sarah about it though. Like to be open with her about it. So again, because we're still in different states at this point. And so anyways, I end up calling her that evening. And she actually had, the kids with her. And so I'm FaceTiming first with her and my kids. And it's late at night where she's about to put the kids to bed or whatever. And it's so weird, my kids, they weren't raised in church or nothing like that. And they would see me meditate. Sometimes we meditate together, that sort of thing. But I saw them like FaceTiming, and I would I was like, they're about to go to bed, and I was like, do you guys want to pray together? And they're like, yeah, they got like really excited about it. And I was like, okay. And like we ended up praying together. And then it was really interesting because in that moment when I was praying with them, I felt a love for my kids to a level that I had never experienced before instantly. And I remember it just stood out to me again. It's just like another thing like, like what just happened there? And so they go to bed, that sort of thing. And I end up talking to Sarah, and I'm like, listen, I need to tell you something. I don't want you to make anything out of it. Doesn't mean anything. It was just encouraged that I be open with you about what's happening. And here's what's happening. So I've been out here, I've been reading, trying to figure out what Jesus says about God, because I'm trying to figure out this whole God thing right now, because I'm really confused about God right now. And then I listened to this song this morning, and all I could get to is this woman saying God is holy, and I start bawling. And someone told me to tell you about it. And then instantly she starts bawling on the phone. And I'm like, what's going on here? You know? And I'm like, what's the matter? Like, what's wrong? And she was just like, nothing. She was like, Brandon, ever since you had that experience, you've been really distant from God. And I've been worried about you because again, like with the whole recovery stuff, like part of our sobriety is we're supposed to keep close to our higher power or whatever. And I had just kind of lost interest in doing a lot of that stuff. And so anyways, she starts crying and she's like, last night I literally started praying for God to show himself to you. And she's like, more or less was like, I feel like, the prayer's been answered. And she's like, so what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I guess, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. Like, I guess I'm just going to keep going and see what happens or whatever. So, anyways, the kids end up moving out. We ended up, I think we actually even like went to church together a couple times or something, but like it didn't, like it just kind of ended up losing steam, if you will. And like, continuing to do the recovery stuff, continuing to do all that stuff. And again, cut me off at any point you need to, because I'll just keep going here with it. But
we got about
there were
we've only got about 10 minutes left. Just to
okay.
give you a heads up.
Sure. So anyways, I'm working in this in Florida. I'm supposed to we're trying to do something with the company to where I'd get a lot of money. And it's weird. It's like kind of suddenly put on my heart that maybe I need to get back to Georgia. And I don't understand, because if I stay in Florida, the idea is I'm going to get a lot of money. And, I remember praying to God at that point, just saying, God, like, you tell me where you want me. If you want me to go back to Georgia, I'll go back to Georgia. If you want me to go to stay here in Florida, I'll stay in Florida. Like, you just tell me where to go. And anyways, for time's sake, it became clear to go back to Georgia. And it didn't quite make sense because I was leaving all this money on the table. But I ended up putting in my notice, taking a job with a company back in Georgia, and moving back to Georgia. And again, like all of this stuff with like Jesus and all that stuff has kind of trailed off at this point, and I'm just kind of doing my regular praying to God and, meditating and all that stuff. And anyways, it's weird. I'm literally driving back to Georgia and it comes on my mind to call this guy. And I call this guy, and he had an experience. I knew him from recovery, but he had an experience with Christianity. And I told him, I said, hey man, it just was put on my mind to call you. And he's like, you're moving back to Georgia, right? And I said, yeah. He's like, where are you moving? I said, around Johns Creek area, that sort of thing. And he starts laughing. And he was like, hey, I know someone that lives in Johns Creek that I want you to meet with, if you'd be open to it. You can talk to him about this thing. Because I was like, I think I kind of want to explore this whole Jesus thing, but I couldn't even say Jesus. It was really hard for me to say, honestly. And anyways, it turns out to be there's this man who started meeting with me weekly for lunch. And I had no idea who he was, but he had actually started this church out here that's really big and walked away from it. And the church was not happy that he walked away from it because he was the main guy, but he walked away from it. And he said, it's very clear that it's God's like putting on my heart to start meeting with non-believers, people that don't believe, and just kind of disciple one-on-one, if you will. And so anyways, we start meeting, and he's like, just bring all your questions. Like, he's like, I'm not asking you to shelve your brain. He's like, but at least why don't you explore it? And that way, if it's not for you, you can say you explored it, right? Because that was like the one religion I didn't explore for me, right? And so I start going through this process or whatever, and start noticing a little bit of change, that sort of thing. But kind of like I said, I would always act out and have some weird behavior show up. I started to do this, and then I inevitably just created a lot of tension in my household, so much so that my wife left the house. And I remember being at home and just being like, God, like, why do I continue to struggle? Like, why do I continue to act this way? Like, why do I continue to harm people close to me? That sort of thing. And I remember calling my buddy, and he said, Brandon, like, if you really want to explore this thing, if you really want to find out if Jesus is real, why don't you just get down on your knees and pray and say, listen, if you're real, show yourself to me, And I get off the phone, and immediately I'm like, listen, I'm not me trying to figure out this thing is not working out. I'm like, if you're real, show yourself to me. Like, I'm open for you to be real. I don't even know if I don't think that you are, to be quite honest with you. But like, if you are, show yourself to me, right? So anyways, like, and again, I'm trying to kind of speed through it for time's sake, but fast forward, nothing happened after that, by the way. It's not like some dove came down from the sky at that point, but the next day something did happen. And I was sitting at home. I'm home alone because my wife had taken off. We were not married yet at this point. And I'm playing Call of Duty at my house, and I'm playing video games. And I started listening to atheists that became Christian because I was curious as to why. Like, why would people come to this faith? I wasn't interested in people that were raised this way. I could not relate with that at all. I want to know why people who thought this wasn't right came to believe that it was right. So I'm listening to this guy's testimony while I'm playing Call of Duty or whatever. And he starts talking about the part to where he came to faith. And I'm listening to it. And all of a sudden, I just start bawling, crying. And it was so weird because I'm like, logically, I was like, why am I crying right now? And I'm like ugly crying or whatever. And I look, and then I stop crying and put the controller down, of course. And I'm looking around, and I don't know how to describe it, but it's this really eerie feeling in the air. And it was kind of scary feeling. And looking back on it, I would have convinced that I would have told you before that I don't know that like evil spirits, like whatever, exist. Like, I'm like, oh no, it's our ego. Like, we just struggle with our ego and our selfishness. Like, and that's the battle, right? But it truly felt in that moment like there was something not good with me in that room at that time. And then I start bawling again. And this is when it gets a little weird, but it's just my experience. And maybe I'm going psychotic, maybe not. But like, I put my head like this, and as clear as can be, like in my mind's eye, right? Jesus comes up to me. And he puts his right hand on my right shoulder. We're facing each other, right? And he says, "You are mine." And I instantly feel a sense of peace that I've never felt in my life before. And that weird feeling, that eerie feeling, completely went away in the moment. And I'm sitting here completely baffled like what just happened, you know? And I had a meeting with this former, this pastor, like upcoming, and I go and I was like sitting down. We would always meet for like food, like lunch, mostly, sometimes dinner. And I was like, man, you're not going to believe what just happened, you know? And I tell him all this, right? And it's weird. And it's like, he's like, listen, he's like, people get this wrong about Jesus and Christianity. It's like, it's not about church. It's not about praying a prayer. He's like, it's not even about it getting emotional or anything. He says, what, if we come to believe that Jesus is who he says he is, it's about following him. And he's like, so I want you to look at your life, because I'd been studying the Bible some a little bit at this point. And he's like, I want you to look at your life, and I want you to look at like what stands out to you, like where do you feel called to follow, right? And there was some behavior in my life that was out of nowhere starting to bug me, and it didn't bug me before, but it started to bug me a little bit. And I told him, I said, man, these couple of things have been placed on my heart. And it's so weird. It's like, it's not like I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this so I can be a good boy. It's like, I feel so loved right now. And I feel so loved by Jesus. And Jesus asked me to live this way. And if this is what you ask of me, it's the least I can do for this amount of grace that I'm feeling from you right now, and this deep sense of satisfaction with life. And I will gladly give these things up to be closer to you. And it was weird, because that was when everything changed for me. It was like I told this guy, I said, here are the things, and I want to give these things up. And I did. And the next day, I had felt a sense of satisfaction, peace, contentment that I've never felt in my entire life. And I remember coming home and telling Sarah, I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is what I've been looking for my entire life. I was like, I finally found it. I finally found it. And it was so confusing, because it was like, I was almost embarrassed. There was almost this part of me is like, why couldn't I have found this in like Buddhism, or like, why couldn't I have found this in, in things? Because I still had such a level of prejudice. And anyways, man, I've been walking that path, and every day that goes by, like I hit some walls for sure, but it's like it ultimately trends in a deeper manner. And there's this line, I kind of want to share this real quick with you. I read this because I related with this so much, and it's um, okay. So there's this book in the Bible called Romans, and it's written by this guy named Paul. And what he writes in one of the books is, he says, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree the law is good. As it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me. That is my sinful nature. For I have a desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This is what I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. And I could get into a whole conversation about sin and what that means and what I thought it meant and all this sort of stuff. But the short of it is there's been this process, like my heart has changed. And that you know how I was kind of sharing earlier, like how I like would be really mean, but like I'm like, I don't want to be mean. Like I have a desire to be nice. Like I still feel the anger, I still feel the meanness, still like, but there's this new power in me. I don't know how to describe it, to where it's like I can be a lot more loving now. And this like there's this anger or something. There's something else that comes up in me and keeps me at peace and can be like, hey, like all of a sudden it's like, well, Brandon, like, no, like practice forgiveness because I'm so forgiven, right? And anyways, it's probably a conversation for another day. I'm still kind of baffled. I'm having the experience. I'm still getting even used to saying the J word, you know, as I call it. But at the same time, it's kind of like you said, like I can't deny my experience.
Mm.
And this has been my experience. And it's weird, man, because especially in some of the circles I run in, you say that J word and it brings up some stuff for people, which I get. I completely get it, because a lot of us have really unfavorable experiences growing up, you know, with some of this stuff, whether it be from our parents, whether it be from people in our lives, whether it be for everything. But you know, it talks about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says in the final analysis, and it talks about kind of deep down within, and it also talks about this idea that God will reveal himself if you seek him. And anyways, that's kind of been my experience, and it's where I've ended up so far. So again, I just going to keep living and doing the deal. And if people ask me about it or it comes up, I'm practicing just being open about it and sharing it, you know, because I think I have such this fear, like I don't want to be that dude on the street with a sign like, hey, like you better believe this or else, you know, like kind of thing. So anyways, man, yeah, that's
No,
kind of it.
that's great. I think that you know, I love I love everything you shared, and I'm watching what my thoughts are doing, and it's just so miraculous to me how this, whatever this is that's breathing us, whatever it is that's happening in this
Mhm.
experience of human being, whatever this is, this world, and you know, we started the conversation with spirituality, the unseen. You know, that
Mhm.
experience you had with the J dog, we'll call him,
Yeah.
you know, was uniquely experienced, can't be proven by anyone other than you. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I think it's so amazing how this power manifests and creates itself for whoever it is, however they are, and whatever it needs to be. It's not about, that's what the thought that came to mind. I was like, wow, like there's a billion, maybe there's a billion different ways that I don't like using the G word, how God can show up in your life. There's a billion, I don't know. It's infinite. And I
Mhm.
struggle the same thing with you. And I could connect with, you know, the one place I didn't want to look happened to be where it was, you know?
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
so yeah, I don't know. I think it's great. And I know I've got my work to do when it comes to talking about God and things like that, because I've got my own issues there as well. And I'm glad we were
Mhm.
able to get on this platform and start and, you know, share some of it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I appreciate you coming on and being so open. And would you be open if anyone reached out? Would you be willing to answer questions or thoughts that people may have?
Yeah. No, I would love that, man. You know, so there's like there's this thing, right? Like I told someone one day, so the term gospel means good news. And it's like I remember telling someone recently, I was like, I finally get it. Because like the truth is I would love to share this with anyone that's interested in listening, you know, because it's been the best news that I've ever had in my life, you know?
Nice.
And you know, I think the thing is like again, I'm just like I'm not gonna shove it down someone's throat. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to talk, I'm like, I'll talk to you all day about this, you know? So yeah, I love it.
Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining. And if you want to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out to Brandon. I'll leave his information in the show notes. And yeah, I guess I'll say, see you on the next one and stay excellent.